Let's come to order, please. I realize that some of you may not know how to address the chair if a woman is sitting in it. So let me give you some ideas. It's Madam Chair, or if you wish, you may follow the example of Sharon Jim and approach me as a bishop, in which case you would address me as Most Reverend Excellency. Your Excellency for short. At this time, we're inviting the co-chair of the committee addressing the abuse of power, Patricia Van Reenen, to lead us in a presentation on this topic. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Patricia Van Reenen, a member of Good News Christian Reformed Church in London, Ontario. I'm also a member of the Classis Chatham Safe Church team. I've been on that team for a number of years, over the 25 years in which I've served, and also a local member on the Safe Church team of Good News Christian Reformed Church. I'm a psychotherapist and registered social worker, and I've worked with survivors of abuse over the past 25 years. Before I begin, I would like to thank Synod for this time in which we can reflect and also perhaps learn about the impacts of the abuse of power. Our topic this afternoon is a difficult one. It might stir up feelings of anxiety or pain, and if you're feeling uncomfortable, there are people at the doors to my right here with badges that are green, indicating that they are support people there for you if you're needing someone to pray with or to talk to or just to be with. Next. So within this next hour, it's divided into 3 sections. The first part of the hour, I will be looking at the power and control wheel, which is a tool that helps us to understand abuses of power. The second part of the hour, Pastor Carl Galancy and myself will be discussing the impact of the abuse of power on a congregation and council, and he himself in a former church. In the last part of the hour, you will be given time to discuss your experiences within your churches that you might have experienced with the abuse of power. Next. When we're looking at power, first a definition. It's a human resource that's God-given, and it's available to us to nourish and to build relationships, or to weaken and cause destruction in relationships. There are different types of power. There is physical power, which is self-evident, really. The stronger you are, the more power you have. Generally speaking, men are built with more muscle than women, and so men are physically stronger than women. There's verbal power. Those who are articulate or eloquent can dominate a conversation or a room, or they can control others using their verbal skills. If we look at Hitler, for instance, he did not have much physical power, but he was very influential. Emotional power. A convincing leader can use his power to positively influence spouses, for instance, who punish by being moody or giving the silent treatment for long periods of time are also using their emotional power, not in a positive way. Knowledge. Knowledge is a type of power. And when we look at theological knowledge granted by education and training, that is power. Some believe it offers ministers the right to talk about God, and other congregants might even believe that that ministers can speak for God. So, for example, a woman who is battered in her relationship with her husband might seek the counsel of her pastor. Her pastor might encourage her to go back to her home rather than seek safety because she's in a relationship where physically she might very well be compromised, hurt, or even hospitalized. She might follow her pastor's advice, thinking that he's speaking for God. Position is another source of power. Doctors, lawyers, church leaders, therapists. We're labeled sometimes as being trustworthy and having integrity. So when I am sitting with a client, I need to be aware of the amount of power that I have and the influence that I have. My clients are coming to me because they're vulnerable. They're coming because they need help. And so an awareness of power in that position is important. Next. This is the workplace power and control wheel. It's a tool that we use in order to educate and understand misuses of power. This one is adapted from the one that was initially made around domestic violence. As yet, there is not a power and control wheel that's specific to church communities. So if we have a look at this power and control wheel, the wheel itself represents a relationship. At the hub of the wheel, you will see there is power and control. In each relationship, there is power. There are 8 sectors around this wheel. The more sectors that are involved in a relationship where power is misused, the more at risk that relationship will be for spinning out of control into a place of possible violence or abuse. If we look at the upper right-hand corner of the next slide, using intimidation. Instilling fear with verbal and/or physical aggression. Smashing a phone, throwing down plates, destroying property, physically blocking a doorway so that an office person cannot leave if he or she is not feeling safe. Excessive micromanagement, using looks, actions, or gestures. The other day, a client was telling me the story when she was very much younger, and her father, whenever he was angry, would use his fist, and he would show his fist. He never hurt her physically with that fist, but the actual gesture of the fist was enough to cause a lot of fear and anxiety in her, and to the point where she felt at times paralyzed. Next slide. Using emotional abuse, put-downs, silent treatment, humiliation and disrespect, name-calling, playing mind games to make you think, in quotation marks, that you're crazy, creating gossip and rumors to influence reputation or work habits. Emotional abuse is used to undermine one's feelings of well-being, self-esteem, and confidence. It causes self-doubt about one's abilities and competency, and thereby the aggressor uses that in order to gain control over the victim. Next. Using isolation. Excluding from social gatherings, important meetings. Perhaps the pastor is not informed of an important executive council meeting. Keeping members uninformed, not soliciting feedback, ignoring someone for long periods of time, treating you as if you didn't belong, as if you're out there, the other, withholding resources. Next. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. Often these are used after abuse has occurred to make light of abuse. For instance, when an individual confronts another about how he felt put down, and the speaker then retorts and says, well, you're just overreacting, or that was just a joke. It's an abuse of power. Accusing the victim of mutual sexual assault, or in quotation marks, wanting an affair. Not believing the victim's story of abuse. A couple required diaconal funds. So a deacon made several house calls to a home when the husband was at work. At first, the woman felt uneasy. She wondered why he was coming when her husband wasn't there. But the deacon showed genuine, it seemed, interest in their financial well-being, so she felt she could trust him. He made a couple more visits, and then he made a surprise visit in which he assaulted her. With the coaching of her husband, this woman went to her pastor and informed him about what had happened. Unfortunately, the pastor did not believe her. She then was re-traumatized because of the disbelief. She left the church, as did her husband. This was an opportunity for healing. She had come forward. Unfortunately, the pastor felt that he could not believe the deacon, that the deacon would harm this woman, not only sexually, but also spiritually. She could not belong to a community where she did not feel physically, sexually, emotionally, or spiritually safe, where her soul was betrayed. If I can't trust a deacon or the pastor, who are God's servants, well then who can I trust? Next slide. Using others, co-opting council members and influential church members as allies in bullying, spreading gossip or rumors to tarnish a victim's reputation, breaking confidentiality of a victim. Next. Using the supervisory privilege. Church leaders have a position, and that can be used to treat others like a servant or lording it over a member. A layperson ordering an admin assistant to perform clerical functions that clearly are not part of her job description might be an example of that. Take credit for the member's work is another example of using a supervisory privilege, or using a position to discredit the member's work. Next slide. Using economic abuse, using threats of dismissal or demotion to control a victim. For example, if a senior pastor were to threaten a youth pastor with wrongful dismissal because he was somewhat threatened by the youth pastor's popularity within the congregation. It's a misuse of power. Withholding tithes or wages, or using a position to manipulate members to offer or invest money for leaders' personal gain. Leaders within a church are in a position of power because of the authority given to them by the church. Because of this power, authority, and inherent trust that congregants offer to them, they must be aware of how they can influence their parishioners. Next slide. Using coercion and threats. Spiritual abuse is an example of this kind of manipulation. Spiritual abuse is a misuse of the Bible and Christian teachings to control behavior or weaken faith. Using texts to rationalize behavior is an example. We see this in child abuse at times, where a leader might reassure a victim that God is happy when we are together. He likes to see that we, in quotation marks, care for each other. Threats of negative spiritual consequences, requiring obedience to the abusive leader. One of the tragic results of sexual abuse is that many survivors feel that no one can understand their inner struggles. Even worse, they may feel that the abuse will keep them from being able to love or to be loved. They feel tarnished, disgusting, and unlovable. This is particularly true in their relationship with God, especially if the abuser was a leader within the church. Their faith in God is tampered. The guilt and shame that they feel challenges them in believing and experiencing God's love. Next. In summary, the abuse of power is a common human problem. We see it in the media focus, in the Me Too, in Church Too, and more recently, the Southern Baptist Convention of Churches. In 1989, a study on the incidence of abuse within our own denomination indicated that it's as prevalent as it is in society. So yes, abuse exists in our churches and in our homes. However, it is in how we respond to the abuse of power that defines us and reflects whether or not we walk our talk. In this next portion of this time, Pastor Carl Galancy and myself will be discussing an example of the impacts of the abuse of power on a congregation and council. Pastor Carl Galancy is a member of Classis Huron. In this interview, we are focusing on the impact of the abuse on a council and a congregation whose previous pastor was guilty of sexual abuse of a minor in a former church. Although we're not focusing on the impact of abuse on the initial survivor, we would like to acknowledge and to thank the survivor who came forward to promote justice and healing for the survivors, the offender, and our congregations. Carl, I understand that you accepted a call to a church, and 1 week after you arrived in the church, the council learned that the previous minister of that church had sexually abused a minor in a former congregation quite a number of years earlier. How did the council and the congregation initially react to this news?
This did happen, and the initial responses were mixed. As you can imagine, disbelief, denial, silence. There were challenges to any sort of public announcement because, well, he had suffered enough and the like. And then once the announcement was made, because we made it public, In the formal life of the church, things just kind of tended to go on as usual, and nothing really happened. It was almost like there was a paralysis or something that set in, which could have been interpreted something along the line of, like, I don't really know what to do with this, so we'll just take this for information, and maybe this will just kind of go away. But I suspect that there was fear behind that of digging deeper. Once you start digging deeper, who knows what will come out. But while that was the initial public and communal reaction, behind the scenes, comments started to bubble up, albeit very slowly. There were those who came to his defense instantly, but others began to tell stories, albeit very tame stories at first. Many people didn't feel comfortable saying anything at all and didn't tell anything until 5, 6, 7 years later. And my suspicions are that there are those there who haven't said anything yet.
How did you feel when you heard this news?
For myself, I suppose I experienced all those same sorts of feelings that members of the congregation felt when they heard the news, a whole range of feelings. There's shock at first, how can this happen? And then I got really angry, and as I've discovered later, I'm still angry, and I need to do that before I retire. I need to work some of that stuff out of my system. This is infuriating, and this is gut-wrenching stuff, and nobody wins in any of this kind of thing. Nobody at all. And then there's all kinds of questions, right, that come up in your mind. So what am I doing here? Why me? What now? What do we do with the news? What am I supposed to do with this news? How come there's all kinds of different reactions among the parishioners? Why isn't everyone as upset about this as I am? Those kind of things. What effect is this going to have on the church? And what effect is this going to have on my ministry? Especially since someone right off the bat said to me, so why should I believe you?
So many of the congregational members felt that they had been betrayed by their former pastor. They questioned, why should I believe you now as a pastor? Could you comment on their feelings of betrayal?
You know, when one is betrayed, trust takes a hit, like it takes a big hit. And so there was hesitancy to trust me, there was hesitancy to trust any leader. You know, why should I believe you indeed? I mean, they didn't know me from a hole in the ground. So if I'm preaching, are my sermons going to be believed? Did words match actions? Those kind of things are always there. And people were not sure about all that. They didn't trust at all. And so they watched, and they watched, and they watched. That's what betrayal of trust looks like. But beyond that, you know, a betrayal of trust also allows people not to go very deeply into their own lives. And so a lot of people lived publicly on a sort of superficial level, which was striking to me as a pastor because you couldn't get very deep. And then behind the scenes, in safe places, people began to say things and they began to tell stories. And I'm going to quote a few things that people have said. I've seen improprieties. I've seen the man involved in things that are inappropriate for a pastor, even a married man, but I did nothing about it. There's that guilt stuff, right? I've been betrayed. I've been angry with him, and I hate him. He married us. Is my marriage legal? He baptized our children. Is their baptism legitimate? If I disagreed with him, he never spoke to me again. And then, you know, people began to question if God is safe. Is God safe? If his servants aren't trustworthy, then is God? And so then you get questions about, like, what is our theology of safety? The church ought to be a place of refuge where one can, talk about the Old Testament image of hold on to the horns of the altar and be safe. So lots of statements were made and lots of questions were asked, but all behind the scenes. Betrayal leads to a lack of confidence and a lack of assurance, a lack of trust, a lack of faith.
How did you work towards regaining that trust?
Simple question, long answer, because it was work. It was hard work indeed. It was interesting, after about 6 months of relative silence from the initial news, some things began to change. And there were two things that were kind of catalysts for change in the council, where they had to talk about it and where they had to make an action of some sort. And to show you how involved this kind of stuff gets, the council that deposed the one who we're talking about is sent to our council a request for participation in a severance package to the tune of $17,000. That makes the elders sit back and go, whoa, like what's with that? So suddenly, and of course they said absolutely no. The second catalyst for the discussion and action was a visit from classical church visitors who came wonderfully and pastorally and wondered out loud how the members of the council were doing, both personally and collectively, with all that had happened. So council members were and then I remember they went around the table and they said, you talk, and everybody had to talk. Council members were forced to talk about the whole thing and to take some actions. But when stuff that's really hard and really digs deep in your life, then what do councils generally tend to do? Well, the easiest thing to do is to do the things that councils can do very easily: pass policy. Right? So then abuse prevention policy was written and enacted. A more robust approach to safe church issues took place, including training. But, those are kind of easy steps. You can do that kind of stuff. Much more difficult to go deeper and to face what really needed conversation and facing. And so I remember at one congregational meeting, part of our training, we showed the film Not in My Church. 22 people attended, 11 of those were council members who had already been busy talking about it. Very, very difficult to convince people that what we were facing was real. So consistent encouragement had to be done to get council and the congregation to face the realities of their story and of what they experienced. And council learned something about what sacred listening was all about. They practiced that and they carried it beyond the council room into the life of the congregation. Besides learning about sacred listening, I think a certain amount of just not letting things go and keeping up the pressure was important. And doing that allowed people to open up privately and to tell their stories. And what also helped was simply naming the issue for what it was: abuse, right? Not hiding it, not minimizing it, not ignoring it, but keeping at it.
Labeling the abuse was important in that process. So some congregational members initially responded to the news of their former pastor's abuse by wanting to forgive him. They said, "He's gone through enough already. Leave him alone." As Christians, we are taught to forgive, so this response is understandable in that it is a Christian principle. Could you explain the process of forgiveness within the context of restoration while you led the church?
Yes, I remember. Forgiveness was something that people were looking for right off the bat. I suspect that some are still looking for that today. Statements like, "We've dealt with it, we've forgiven him," get real, we're all sinners. And then I'm sure glad that the initial abuse didn't happen here, glad it happened somewhere else. Those kind of statements were common. But instant quick forgiveness can be really incredibly cheap. Forgiving right off the bat would be like shutting the door to dealing with one's own heart and soul and mind and with whatever else might come on down the road. If we had said, he's forgiven, it's okay, we would have done an injustice to the victim and to all those who experienced abuse and betrayal. It would have, as some tried to do, removed all sense of accountability for past actions. Really what we needed was time. Time was needed to explore the impacts, to explore people's thoughts and feelings, to explore if there were other victims. Forgiveness is a process. Instant, cheap forgiveness doesn't allow for tough questions to be asked. It doesn't allow for a community to really call abuse for what it is. And it doesn't allow for appropriate, sacred listening. Education is needed, discussion is needed, sacred listening is needed, and it takes time. True forgiveness, I suppose, is not holding something against someone anymore, but that requires an understanding, a deep understanding of what has happened and the impact of what has happened on the lives of all those who are involved. Forgiveness comes somewhere along the line, but it may be a long way off. And forgiveness and the call to forgiveness is often used to shut down a process, to shut down a deeper reflection. It's used as a way of quickly forgetting and moving on, but abuse cuts so deep and its effects are so long-lasting that one cannot simply say forgive and forget. One can't just move on as many were desiring to do. Oh, and forgiveness also doesn't mean that all boundaries are gone. In order to protect the emotional safety needs of survivors, there's still consequences for any perpetrator, so he or she may have to face not only civil punishment, but deposition from office, not being allowed into church leadership anymore. They may not be welcome at that particular church anymore. A picture may not be hung. There may be no invitation to an anniversary or anything of the sort. There's just a few things, but there's always consequences for our actions.
Carl, you had shown me the notes that you retained while going through the process of healing and restoration. You informed me that part of the process involved contact with any and all former staff and also meetings with other churches who had walked similar paths, including a church where the former pastor had also ministered. Can you tell us about some of that?
I did keep notes on all the things that were happening, all the different meetings and discussions and decisions that were made, and they helped me to keep track of what was being said, what was done, and who we were in contact with, and the decisions that were being made. And going back over those notes in preparation for this, it reminded me, which I knew already, but of the importance of the denominational Safe Church office and our local classical Safe Church team. Without them, we would have floundered, probably not did what we managed to do. And so I want to acknowledge that. They were there as guides, as mentors, as encouragers, and so forth, and we spent a lot of time with them. But then as we've moved forward and worked on restoration, one of the things we did was to review the staff history of the church and of the congregation. And among the things that we noted was that a number of pastoral staff were staying for under 2 years, no longer than 2 years, and then they left the congregation under varying circumstances. And so out of concern not only for the congregation but also for all former staff, both pastoral and administrative staff, Council made it a point to contact them all and to visit with them all and to phone them and to connect with them all if possible. And the purpose of those visits was, number one, to inform them of the process taken that we were taking to address the impact of abuse on the congregation. But besides that, and more importantly, they wanted to make sure that all former staff were okay And was there anything that we needed to do in order to restore them, or what did we need to do with them? And all those visits culminated in a weekend of worship services, a weekend of restoration, so to speak. 7 years after the initial announcement was made, in which we dealt head-on with the impact of the abuse on the life of the congregation. And it involved worship services of repentance and restoration and renewal. But prior to that weekend, as you mentioned in your question, we had a joint sacred listening time with a sister congregation to share experiences around the same perpetrator. And as you can tell, 7 years, this is 7 years after the initial notes announcement was made, we were still busy with this. And as a matter of fact, it was more intense than ever. It's an ongoing process, and it took time to build the willingness and the trust and the openness to deal with the hurt and the pain of the initial news. But at that meeting, where that sacred listening with the sister congregation, we were asked by the person who was leading it to list the losses sustained as a result of our story. And it was incredible. The lists were long. They mentioned things like the ability to trust each other and to trust leadership. They lost the willingness to deal with tough stuff. And so things were kept at a surface level. They actually mentioned that. They said we lost direction, we lost optimism, we lost connectedness. And then the delegates spoke of the congregations, were what the congregations had lost. And they mentioned such things as we lost members, we lost youth, we lost joy, we lost trust, we lost confidence, we lost focus. They spent incredible amount of time in meetings, sometimes away from home, requiring travel. They talked about things about losing emotional energy and spiritual energy, and they talked about losing staff members and people to ministry. They talked about finances and the counseling that was needed for counseling for past employees and victims. And like the lists were long. I think you get the point. Multiple losses and multiple emotions. And then a phenomenal fatigue. I mean, we've been at this for 7 years. Phenomenal fatigue. And then the idea that there was absolutely no closure to this. There doesn't seem to be an end to this. That's not really surprising, because there is really no end to this. It takes generations sometimes to deal with this kind of stuff.
Yes, it does take generations. It was a long, arduous struggle involving collaborative work, open communication, much determination, and prayer. Some identify these seasons within a church as a winter season of reflection and inward looking. In the end, it sounds to me that the congregants felt safe enough to begin that process of opening themselves up to their feelings so they could begin to heal.
'Twas a long process. I remember it was a very long process indeed. And we only scratched the surface. They were just beginning kind of in that healing thing. It was a season of reflection. It was a season of looking inward, tons of meetings, retreats, church visits, meetings with Safe Church team, with the Office of Safe Church, discussions at council meetings. Education and awareness seemed to be on every agenda. And indeed, people finally began to speak, mostly privately, however, not publicly. This stuff is not publicly, about their own perspective. And as time went on, they began to speak about their own guilt, about not doing anything, their collective guilt, about not doing anything when they saw that things were not right. It really gets to be something when somebody says, I was taken, we were all taken. When they make that kind of a statement, then you kind of have the idea they're finally getting the picture of what really truly happened and the impact on them, because that is quite the statement. The process will probably continue. I'm no longer there. I'm tired, but the process will probably continue, and may the Lord grant them mercy and His grace to work through some of this. And I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Carl. Now, you as delegates have the opportunity to discuss some of the experiences that you might have had or that you've had with your colleagues, or perhaps some of the feelings that might have been brought up today listening to Carl and his story. There are on your tables questions. There are 2 questions, and the questions are on the slide as well. So using the power and control wheel that's at your table, you might use that as a reference point in order to initiate some discussion. But there are 2 questions there. The first question, to discuss the impact of the abuse of power on the congregation and church from your own experiences. And the second question, which is equally important, to discuss good practices of prevention and healing in responding to the impact of the abuse of power. I would imagine that within some of your churches and classes, some of these things are already operational, and so sharing them with each other is also helpful. You have about 20 minutes, I think, in order to have that discussion.
I'd like you to take a couple more minutes to wrap up your conversations, and then we'll be concluding this part of the afternoon. Thank you for participating in this discussion. Let's finish our sentences, wrap up our conversation, and conclude this part of our afternoon. My mom's stare. We all want to thank you, Patricia and Carol, for your very important presentation. We thank you too, for Patricia, for your work as co-chair of that committee. Very much appreciated. Please keep in mind what we've just learned when we turn to the recommendations in Report 4A later in this time that we're meeting together as Synod. And also, I'm sure you've already thought of this before, how you can carry this back to your councils and your classes. Later in this Synod, we'll have an opportunity to reflect on this topic through worship. But right now, I think it would be really important for us to just take a few minutes, engage in a time of silent prayer and reflection, and pray for all those we know or perhaps don't know who have suffered under the abuse of power. Let's pray. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Amen. We're going to resume Report 3, Committee 3, but I invite you to turn to Section 4, the Candidacy Committee, And in fact, turn over a page to number 3, which is on page 5. Number 3, recommendation 3, which is on page 5.
Thank you. I didn't get your title right the last time.
Your
High,
Excellency.
Your Excellency? Okay,
Yeah,
thank
Your
you.
Excellency.
Got it. We skipped down here because we want to present to the candidates for ministry tomorrow morning, and it would really be good if we would approve them before we present them. So we would like to approve them at this time. However, for the first time, there is something different coming before us, and that's written up in recommendation number 3, and I would like to present that and propose that. That a synod allow that 4 of the candidates presented by the candidacy committee remain anonymous and listed only by their initials at the request of the respective candidates as presented by the candidacy committee and the synod advisory committee. So moved.
Would it be important if we hear the grounds for that? I think so.
Okay. A, these candidates will be working in sensitive geographical areas which could endanger themselves, their families, and the people they minister with if their ministerial status was public. B, they have fulfilled all the requirements of the candidacy committee and have been reviewed by the Synod Advisory Committee. These candidates have requested anonymity. These candidates will be known by their calling church and the classes which will examine them when they are called.
Is there support? Any discussion? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. The motion carries.
Following this up, our committee recommends number 4, that Synod instruct the candidacy committee to develop guidelines to deal with future candidates who wish to remain anonymous. These guidelines will be presented to the Synod of 2020. So moved.
Support? Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion carries.
Now, we get to the main event. That Synod declare the following persons as candidates for the ministry of the Christian Reformed Church. And there they are listed in front of you.
Support? Support. Discussion? All those in favor, vote aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The motion carries.
It seems like such a brief time to approve the work, which for some of these candidates, they would say is a lifetime of work,
Yeah.
right? And we just did that. We will have the opportunity to congratulate them tomorrow. I think not all of them will be here. We will have a pretty good group though, right? So they'll be here tomorrow, and we'll be able to express our appreciation and congratulations at that time.
Yes.
Moving on. That Synod approved the extensions of candidacy for the following persons. And I believe there is one person here that has received a call, and so no longer has to be on the list. And pardon? David, could you? Okay. Nicole Veenkamp. Okay, the third to the last one on the right-hand side.
Any conversation, discussion, questions? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I will continue with 7. That Synod reinstate the candidacy of Mr. Ryan Schreiber and Mr. Christopher Walhout as described in the Candidacy Committee Supplement Section 1C. So moved.
Discussion? Yes.
Jesse Walhoff, Classis Heartland. I'm just wondering if that is Chris Walhoff, my second cousin. And this name is spelled wrong.
No. David?
Tim Caparis, class is Yellowstone. He's from our neighboring church. So it is Chris Walhoff.
And Madam Chairwoman, I make that a motion that we correct the spelling to my last name.
So noted.
H-O-F. Thank you.
H-O-F. Thank you for that helpful correction. Any further discussion? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That carries.
Now, interestingly, the next one says this, that Synod endorse the action of the candidacy committee in correcting a clerical error regarding the extended candidacy in 2018 for Miss Nicole Veenkamp. Apparently, that's common.
Mistakes happen. Support? Any conversation, questions? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, the same sign. It
Going on
carries.
to number 9, that Synod approve the action of the candidacy committee in declaration of need for the persons listed in the candidacy committee supplement, section 2, for affiliation under Church Order, Article 8. So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Number 10, that Synod approve the following with regard to the EPMC Task Force report presented in the appendix to the candidacy committee supplement. A, that Synod take note of the growth of the ecclesiastical program for ministerial candidacy and affirm with appreciation the need to evaluate the goals and effectiveness of the program and request that the candidacy committee provide an update on the survey and study to Synod 2020. And B, that Synod encourage delegates to Synod 2020 to complete the EPMC survey of delegates that is available on the Synod site for delegates and advisors. Delegates are requested to complete the survey by June 30, 2019, and I would like to report a clerical error. That Synod encourage the delegates to Synod 2019.
Support? Discussion? All those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And would you like to point out to people where exactly they can find that
If you
survey?
go to the home page of the Synod site and you go to announcements, it should be the very top announcement that you find. So go to the home page of the Synod site, go to announcements, it should be the very top announcement about the EPMC survey.
But
Please
go
take
ahead.
that. It doesn't going to take too long. Just take that before you go home and forget about it, okay?
But just don't do it right now, okay? All right, and then we're going to move back to Roman numeral 4 on page 3. Is that correct? All right, Roman numeral 4, page 3, C, recommendations. Going back to that section
Okay.
of the report.
That Synod adopt the following recommendations concerning Church Order Articles 8, 23, 24, and 82 through 84, and their supplements. And I think it would probably be best to go through them one at a time and approve
Okay.
them. Okay? A, that Synod adopt the reformatted Church Order Articles 23 through 24 as proposed by Synod 2018 and as presented in this report, Section 3, Paragraph A. So moved.
Right, so what we're doing is ratifying changes that were approved last year. Changes in the church order require the approval of 2 consecutive synods. Any conversation, discussion, questions? Yes?
Chair, would it not be appropriate to have the word adopt be ratified?
Up to your committee. You accept
Another
that as a
clerical change here.
another clerical change, friendly
I'm feeling really,
change?
really small as a reporter.
That's
Go
Synod
ahead.
ratified?
That's fine.
All right.
Okay with you, Steve?
Yeah, Kathy? It is adopt.
I'll try again. Just the church order actually says that when we have a two-stage process like this, one synod proposes and the second adopts. So we don't use the word ratified. Adopt would be correct.
Thank you.
I don't approve the change.
So we're at recommendation 1A. All those in favor, vote aye. Opposed, the same sign. That carries.
B, that Synod approve the proposed reformatted supplements to the Church Order Articles 23 through 24 as acknowledged by Synod 2018 and as presented in this report 3B. So moved.
Support. Should it say adopt?
We already said adopt. Oh, it says approve? You're right, it should say adopt. No?
Number 1.
Adopt is already in 1. Okay. Got it covered. Anything else? All those in favor vote aye. Opposed, same sign.
C, that Synod approve the proposed changes to Church Order Supplement Articles 82 to 84, Sections E and F, as presented in this report, 3C.
Support? Discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed, same sign. It carries. Got to switch it up.
Letter D, listen carefully, that Synod adopt the revised statements of Church Order Supplement Article 8, Sections E and F, as presented in this report, 3D. So moved.
Support? Discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed, same sign. Okay.
E, that Synod receive the comments offered by the Candidacy Committee in Section 3E of this report regarding guidelines for video examinations and regarding the use of Church Order Article 8 for receiving an individual ordained by an independent congregation as fulfilling its assignment by Synod 2018, and instruct the committee to place these comments in appropriate sections of the Commissioned Pastor Handbook and the Journey Toward Ordination document. So moved.
Discussion. All those in favor vote yes. Opposed, same sign.
F, that Synod approve a change of title for the Church Order Supplement, Article 8, Section E, quote, calling ministers ordained outside of the Christian Reformed Church in North America, unquote, along with related editorial changes in the text of that section and in the Journey Toward Ordination document. So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed, same sign.
G, that Synod approve the updated Commissioned Pastor Handbook as presented in Appendix A. So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed?
H, that Synod approve the updates to the Journey Towards Ordination document as presented in Appendix B. So moved.
Discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Toward?
It should be toward. Yes,
Toward.
that's the document is entitled Toward.
All right. Did we vote on that? Not, yes, we did. Letter I?
We're up to I. That Synod instruct the Candidacy Committee to work with the Office of Synodical Services in making both the Commissioned Pastor Handbook and the Journey Toward Education document readily available in PDF format on the CRCNA website and also potentially available in print-on-demand format through Faith Alive Christian Resources. So moved.
Another typo. Duly noted.
You want two formats? The F in PDF is also the word format.
Pointing out, we can wordsmith this, fine. So readily available in PDF, and strike the word format, because the F means format. So it's redundant. Got it. Any other discussion on letter I? All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed?
J, that Synod approve the following changes to Church Order Article 8 as discussed in Section 4 of this report. Underlining indicates changes to the text. 1, ministers ordained outside of the CRCNA who desire to become ministers in the Christian Reformed Church shall be required to complete a learning plan endorsed by the Candidacy Committee. And 2, ministers ordained outside of the CRCNA who have not been declared eligible for a call shall not be called unless all synodical requirements have been met. So moved.
Any discussion? I see none. All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed, same sign. Oh, there is somebody on the queue. Okay, Brian? We'll hold off on finishing that vote.
Just a point of clarification. Does this affect, Brian Sharpie, classes Rocky Mountain. Does this affect Article 8 when ministers are already ordained and they're entering into the Christian Reformed Church?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, then I would speak against the motion if this would be adding requirements that are more than are currently being asked.
David, you want to respond to that?
Thanks, Brian. This is not changing requirements at all. It's simply wordsmithing. The current reading is that ministers ordained in other denominations. And we're trying to respond to the reality that independent churches also have pastors that we might want to affiliate. So if that wording comes this way, it helps us out better.
David, is the learning plan and the word a learning plan endorsed by the Candidacy Committee, is that a stronger commitment that these pastors have to make?
That's discussed within the report. The answer is maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
Okay. There are some non-accredited learning plans, and there's something called the Modified EPMC, which is an accredited program at Calvin Seminary, and there are criteria that we're using to decide which of those should be required. And that is not a change either. That's something that had previously been adopted by Synod, but the previous words of this church order should be required to complete the MEPMC. But we reported to Synod 7 years ago that MEPMC ought to stand for something beside only the accredited program. We also need to use these individual non-accredited learning plans. Synod said yes, but now we're finally getting the wording of the church order to be more clear.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I see no other speakers. All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed, same sign.
Letter K, that Synod approve the following 2 proposals related to the orderly exchange of ministers between the CRC and the RCA, as discussed in Section 5 of this report. 1, that the executive director will be instructed to work with the appropriate bodies in the CRC and the RCA to bring the text of the orderly exchange of ministers agreement into consistency in both denominations, including Statement 12 as found in the Church Order Supplement, Article 8, Section D. And 2, that Synod 2019 approve that in the meantime the following note be placed after Church Order Supplement Article 8 D 12. Due to unknown factors, this statement currently does not appear in the RCA Book of Order, yet it is accepted as valid within the CRC. So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor, vote yes. Yes. Opposed, same sign.
I'm just happy to see that the RCA has clerical errors too.
I think it's called total depravity, isn't it? Not anymore.
2, that Synod take note and give thanks of the various initiatives and challenges identified by the Candidacy Committee in this report, and give thanks for the Candidacy Committee. So moved.
Support.
No discussion. All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed, same sign. David, I know you're here. Are there any other members of the Candidacy Committee here today? Okay. We'll make sure we thank them then as well. But let's give our thanks to Dave for all of his work and the work of his committee. And I believe that's everything in your report, right? You got one more?
We have other
Oh, that's
educational
right.
institutions,
Yep, we got
beginning,
other
I believe, with
institutions.
5 Dort University.
Okay, let's
Okay? Number 5, Dort University, the recommendation is this, that Synod give praise to God for the Spirit's work at Dort University. We rejoice with Dort for the evidence of fruitfulness through the 1,600 students on campus and the alumni scattered around the globe. We rejoice specifically for the Christian vocational and technical program that was recently instituted. Let us commit to pray for continued effectiveness at developing kingdom citizens serving Christ Jesus with God helping us. So moved.
Support.
All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed? Continue.
6, Institute for Christian Studies. Our recommendation is the following. That Synod celebrate the relocation of the Institute for Christian Studies into the middle of the University of Toronto downtown St. George campus. We celebrate the highest level of enrollment in the past 6 years and the recent development of several programs, including a partnership with the Christian Teachers Academy of Advance, launching an educational leadership stream for their MA program, and offering affordable distance education versions of Master of Worldview Studies classes. So moved.
Support.
All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed?
7, King's University. The recommendation reads as follows, that Synod express thanks to God with the King's University for their student growth, their recommitment to liberal arts, launching of the Justice Fellowship Program, and their struggle with being an accredited university in Canada. We celebrate their 40th year of training students to glorify God, and they're bringing renewal and reconciliation in Christ's name. We appreciate their efforts to keep the university affordable and are elated to hear that more than 90% of their graduates find meaningful employment after graduation. Together, we pray that God will direct their search committee to find a new vice president of academic research who will bring energy, wisdom, and growth. So moved.
Support.
All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed?
8, the recommendation that Synod celebrate with Kuiper College its 80th anniversary and continued dedication to root its students in a robust knowledge and life application of God's Word. We pray for Kuiper in its efforts to prepare a growing and diverse demographic of students to be globally competent leaders in an innovative and engaging learning community while ensuring long-term financial viability for the college. We express gratitude for the mutually supportive partnership between the CRCNA and Kuiper College in equipping students for service in God's church and world. So moved.
All those in favor vote yes. Opposed?
Now, somebody was mentioned to me, perhaps the president of Kuiper College was here this afternoon. Is that true? I just stepped in. Oh,
Wonderful.
so timely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Redeemer University, a recommendation that Synod celebrate with Redeemer University College the inauguration of Dr. Robert J. Graham as the university's 4th president. In its final year of a strategic plan, the university celebrates programs in media and communications studies, urban and intercultural ministry, a new center for experiential learning and careers, and having received a substantial gift to assist students with tuition costs, allowing for a 42% reduction in tuition for Canadian undergraduate students. We pray for God's continued blessing on Redeemer's Reformed mission and vision to remain vibrant, strong, and relevant for the next generation of students. So moved.
Support. All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed?
And finally, Trinity Christian College. That Synod give praise to God with Trinity Christian College for the strong support from CRCNA congregations. Trinity is grateful for recent highlights like a new strategic partnerships, a new campus master plan, as well as an impressive rates of graduation, graduate employment, graduate school placement, and alumni satisfaction. Also, Trinity celebrates its CPA passage rates and the distinction of having the top-rated BSN program in Illinois. With the abundant opportunities faculty, students, and graduates have in Chicago, Trinity is honored to be in partnership with other Reformed Christian places of higher education that seek to integrate faith, emotion, and intellect. So moved.
Coach Rolls.
All those in favor vote yes. Yes. Opposed? If I can take just a minute. If you are a graduate or a part of the staff or faculty of Trinity, Redeemer, Kuiper, King's, ICS, or Dort, would you stand? We give God thanks for those institutions and for the people who have been part of them and graduated from them. Gary?
That's it. And we introduced the president of Kuiper College, and I didn't use her name. Dr. Patty Harris is. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's time for us to get ready for our evening meal, but before we do that, please listen to these important announcements. First of all church planters are asked to please meet at the banner table, which is right there, and because they would like to take a picture of you at the dinner, over the dinner break. There are 2 special suppers this evening. There's a deacon dinner. If you're not sure if you're going to that deacon dinner or not, check the back of your name tag and it will tell you if you registered for that. That dinner is being held in the Alumni Association boardroom in the Commons Attics. And then young adult representatives, a reminder to you that you're meeting with the officers over dinner tonight, and that's also in the Commons Annex in room 214. We'll reconvene at 7 p.m. this evening. On our agenda is Report 7B, Financial Matters Advisory Committee, and we will be talking about reimagining ministry shares. Irma, would you please come forward to lead us in prayer? Thank you.
Can everybody stand, please? We are going to pray. Gracias, Espíritu Santo, te doy en esta tarde, Señor. porque has proveído de dones espirituales a todo este grupo de hijos tuyos, Señor. Te doy inmensa gracia porque tú eres, Señor, el que has estado dirigiendo todo esto que se ha hecho aquí, Señor, todo para tu gloria y tu honra. Te doy gracias, Señor, porque también has traído, Señor, a refrescar los frutos espirituales, Señor. Has traído el amor, has traído la paciencia y has traído todo lo que todo cristiano, Señor, tiene que tener en su corazón. Te damos gracias porque todo esto te lo debemos a ti, Señor. Continúa siendo el líder y el invitado especial en todo este evento. En el nombre de Jesús te lo pido. Amén.
Amén.